at the table. In the government structure, there were specific rules outlined for that. Now, some 50% of the wood produced in Quebec is exported to the U.S., so that shows just how important it is to deal with this uncertainty that exists. I think that we can now move directly into statements by members.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, it's incredible but true. Some mothers who lose their source of income during their parental leave don't have the right to EI. Imagine how difficult it is for these families who welcome a new baby into the family, but then suddenly lose a source of income. Imagine the consequences for a single mother. The problem is that employment insurance benefits are calculated based on the hours worked over the course of the previous year. And new mothers don't accumulate enough of them because of parental leave. Although there is an exception, the vast majority of mothers are left by the wayside. So today I'm tabling a bill to end this unfair situation. But let's be honest, Mr. Speaker, this injustice is unacceptable, and the solution is very simple. We have indicated to the Minister of Labour that this changed 4 months ago, and now is the time to take action. Quebec women should no longer be punished for becoming mothers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honored to rise in the House today to pay tribute to our families who a year ago were putting up with long days and late nights as we were wrapping up our campaigns. Each of us is here to represent our communities, and families are the foundation of these. Without our families' tireless support, we would not be able to be here serving our country. Today I have 12 of my close family with me, including my mother-in-law Bridget Malone from Winnipeg, my wife Barbara, our daughters Shauna, Carolyn, Christina, their spouses and their families visiting our national capital region and cheering me on as they always have. Let's never forget that each of us have those at home and across the country who love and support us. On behalf of the entire House, I'd like to say thank you to all of them.
Member for Yorkton Melville.
Mr. Speaker, today I issued a news release calling on the Liberal government to support my private member's bill, Cassie and Molly's Law, as part of the government's broader strategy to address gender-based violence. In Canada, there are no provisions in the criminal code to protect pregnant women, a gap in the law that is leaving Canadian women vulnerable. My bill is specific and targeted, adding new charges for crimes against a pregnant woman that harm or end her pregnancy. Canadians want this bill. In a poll I commissioned from Nano Research, 70% were supportive of Cassie and Molly's Law, with support among women even higher at 75%. I want to be clear. This legislation does not in any way change or impact the law or limit or undermine abortion in Canada. The leading constitutional law firm Supreme Advocacy confirms this in their thorough report on Cassie and Molly's Law that every member in this House has a copy of. Please join me in supporting common sense legislation that denounces violence, stands up for victims, and protects pregnant women.
The member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This year in my riding of Kingston and the Islands, Queen's University celebrated their 175th anniversary.
This important milestone demonstrates Queen's University's initiative and its excellence in education.
This past weekend, Queen's celebrated homecoming. The 3 days of Homecoming 2016 saw a record-setting 100 classes and groups participate in the celebration and mark the completion of their successful initiative campaign. No homecoming would be complete, Mr. Speaker, without a football game, and the Queen's Gaels were able to welcome alumni and students to their first homecoming game in the revitalized Richardson Stadium and wow the crowd with a 55-5 victory.
To all those that returned to Kingston this past weekend, welcome home.
To return to Kingston this past weekend, welcome home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to draw attention to the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. In Canada, a wealthy country, 1 person out of 10 lives in poverty. Despite this House's unanimous desire to take action, poverty rates in Canada are as high as ever. There is no justification for this type of inaction. It's time to show leadership. The NDP has long had a clear plan to help the most vulnerable, families of the middle class and seniors who are struggling to make ends meet. That's why I'm tabling Bill C-245 for the reduction of poverty. It calls for the creation of a federal plan to eliminate poverty to ensure that no one is left by the wayside. So, dear colleagues, I ask you all to read this bill and to support it in second reading. Thank you.
Rivière des Mille Îles.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is a Small Business Week, and I'm very happy to have a family from Saint-Eustache here in the House and to congratulate them for their intergenerational entrepreneurial endeavors. For 75 years, they've been running the Constantin Sugar Shack, which is recognized in the region for its regional maple products. The family has always worked tirelessly to support their business, which is now in its fourth generation. When I was a child, I particularly loved maple sugar, and I'm happy to see that this Constantin Sugar Shack is still the specialist in this dessert, and it has been since 1947. Jeannette, I tip my hat to you for your devotion. You're an inspirational woman, and you're an inspiration to every Canadian. Finally, I'd like to thank the Constantin family for their devotion. They have showed us all that after 75 years and 4 generations, there's still passion for this industry.
For York Simcoe.
Would you hold a birthday party for a 7-year-old boy, but not allow him to come? Would you stage a lavish 50th wedding anniversary party, but not tell the honoured couple? Of course not, but that is exactly what this Liberal government is doing. Next year, Canada will celebrate the 150th anniversary of Confederation, but the Liberals have decided that Confederation and Canadian history are not welcome at the party. The only themes the Liberals will allow to be supported are youth, the environment, diversity, and Aboriginal reconciliation. Confederation is not a theme of the 150th anniversary of Confederation. This absurd situation is just the latest salvo in the Liberal war on history. Instead of being ashamed of our history, we should celebrate the events that have built the best country in the world. Honor the contributions of the fathers of Confederation, like MacDonald, Cartier, Brown, and McGee. Confederation was an act of unification of provinces, of languages, and of people around a single idea, the country of Canada. Let's end the Liberal war on history, and next year celebrate the 150th anniversary of Confederation.
Member for Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake.
Monsieur le Président, je prends parole.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to express my support and the support of my constituents from Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake for the rescue efforts that are underway following serious flooding in Cape Breton. As you know, these communities are facing unimaginable circumstances. They require a lot of support, and I want to congratulate the families and all the individuals who are making efforts there.
Also, as a native from Cape Breton, I'm extremely proud of the people of Cape Breton and how they came to support each other, and they always do. They never leave anybody behind in tough situation, and I'm proud to be a native of Cape Breton. And I'd like to thank our Minister, of course, of Public Safety for him being present on the ground, talking with individuals and helping and talking about our government. I want to thank, of course, the Member of Parliament from Sydney, Victoria, and the Member of Parliament, Cape Breton, Canso, and also the Premier of Nova Scotia for being on the ground and talking and sharing and showing how Nova Scotia will support all Cape Bretoners.
The Honourable Member for Long Range Mountains.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last weekend, communities in my riding and across the East Coast faced severe storms as Hurricane Matthew left its mark. We saw roads and bridges washed out due to the heavy rainfalls along the Port-au-Port Peninsula and the highway to Burgeo. And I know in many other communities across Newfoundland, like Gander, St. Albans, and Lewisport, families are feeling the effects. But we've also seen how Newfoundlanders and Labradorians look out for each other, Mr. Speaker. We check on our neighbours and take in those in need. We've seen folks fill up boats to deliver supplies to communities who've been totally cut off due to the storm. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank everyone who has lent a helping hand to their neighbours and all the crews who've been working tirelessly to ensure the roads can be reopened and food and supplies make it to every community. Thank you also to the provincial and municipal colleagues for their great work organising the response on the ground. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I want constituents to know that through the federal government's disaster financial assistance program, their government of Canada will be there to help our province and all Atlantic provinces rebuild.
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Speaker, 2 weeks ago, the Finance Minister took another stab at addressing housing affordability and related mortgage insurance risk to Canadian taxpayers. Again, the Finance Minister is imposing a one-size-fits-all response on Canadian consumers and the mortgage industry while missing the target. I'm concerned for young families who will bear the brunt of the Liberal carbon tax and may now have a harder time achieving their dream of home ownership. I'm also concerned about the effect of the Minister's announcements on competition in the mortgage business, and I'm disappointed that this important policy change was imposed on consumers and the mortgage industry with no consultation or notice. Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister is the one who has an out-of-control borrowing problem. TD Bank now estimates the deficit's going to be another $5 billion more than budgeted. He thinks that low interest rates are dangerous for Canadian consumers, but a perfect justification for an out-of-control deficit. Nobody needs a lecture from this Finance Minister on the risks of excessive debt.
Honourable member for St. John's South Mount Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many in this House know, Newfoundland and Labrador is a fine province renowned for its bilingual jurists. Just thought I'd point that out, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, it's also renowned for its weather, and ours was recently hit hard by heavy rains and high winds. My riding was spared, but communities like St. Albans, Morrisville, and Burgeo weren't so lucky. Heavy flooding damaged homes and infrastructure, flash flooding destroyed highways and cut access to communities. And just this morning, the member from Coast of Bays Central Notre Dame is helping out some people with their flooded basement. First responders are working around the clock. Homes and businesses like the Claude Sound Motel in Charlottetown, Newfoundland, opened up their doors to passers-by. And musicians like Jennifer Mitchell and her father Gary played traditional music on the side of the road to keep people's spirits up. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, our thoughts are with our neighbours in Nova Scotia, particularly our friends in Cape Breton, who were hit very hard by the storm. Our thoughts and prayers are with everyone who is affected by these events.
For Cape Breton Canso.
Mr. Speaker, last Monday, the province of Nova Scotia was hammered by the remnants of Hurricane Matthew. Parts of Cape Breton Island received over 240 millimeters of rain in an 8-hour period and was driven by 120 kilometers an hour winds. The result was widespread flooding, washouts, road closures, and extensive power outages. My colleague and I from Sydney, Victoria, welcomed the Minister of Public Safety on Friday past to tour some of the hardest hit sites. We were joined by Provincial Minister of Transportation Jeff McClellan and area MLAs to see the loss and destruction firsthand. To speak with the people whose lives have been devastated by this event was moving, to say the least. We applaud the hundreds of first responders, the armies of families, friends, and neighbors who helped out. Know that your actions are noble and appreciated. Together, we can share the burden and the work in rebuilding our communities. Premier Stephen McNeil has pledged to make assistance quick, efficient, and unencumbered. The people of Nova Scotia must know that this government will be there as a willing partner to help our people through this terrible ordeal.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, after proposing to shut out Atlantic Canada from the Supreme Court for the first time ever, it's good to see that the Liberals have reversed their position, listened to Conservatives, and appointed an panel. Mr. Speaker, while today's Supreme Court appointment fills an important court vacancy, there remain dozens of vacancies across Canada. As a result of the Minister of Justice's inaction, serious criminal cases are being thrown out of court, including most recently a first-degree murder case in Alberta. For months, the minister has been talking about filling judicial vacancies, all the while leaving 60 seats vacant. Mr. Speaker, before the next serious criminal case is thrown out of court, it's time for the minister to fill these vacancies and do so immediately.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Centre.
Today I rise in this House with a heavy heart. Last week, Albertans and Canadians lost one of our most devoted public servants, The Honourable Jim Prentice served with honour and conviction as a member of this House, as a member of the Federal Cabinet, and as Premier of Alberta. As a Cabinet Minister, Mr. Prentice was instrumental in establishing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. As an MP, he showed great courage and compassion by standing as a supporter of marriage equality when it was not easy to do so. He
learned French, and he required his Hill staff to speak French as well.
Premier, he was a tireless advocate for the environment and the economy. On behalf of my Alberta caucus colleagues and of all the caucus colleagues from coast to coast to coast, we send our thoughts and prayers to Jim's devoted wife, Karen, and their family. Thank you for sharing your husband, father, and grandfather with us. Jim will be sorely missed.
The honourable member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, it is with heavy heart that I stand in this chamber today to express on behalf of all New Democrats our deep sorrow after learning of the tragic loss of our former colleague and friend Jim Prentice. Jim was an exemplary member of Parliament. He was thorough and highly competent in his preparation, measured and articulate in debate, and his true strength was working with all members of this House. I had the opportunity to experience firsthand his professionalism. We all know in this House his sincerity and conviction were beyond reproach. He carried himself with a dignity and honour that all honourable members would do well to emulate. I want to offer our deep condolences to Jim's family and friends, particularly his wife Karen and daughters Christina, Cassia and Kate. We thank you for sharing him with us. Canada is a better place for his service with us.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the tragic passing of a man who was a friend to our entire caucus and a close member of our Conservative family for a very long time, Jim Prentice. I know all of us here have Jim's family in their thoughts. To his wife Karen and his children and grandchildren, our hearts go out to them in the wake of their terrible loss. Jim served his constituents in Calgary Centre North for over 6 years with devotion. His genuine blue-collar upbringing clearly served him well as the minister responsible for Aboriginal affairs, for industry, and for environment. He was a true gentleman politician, kind and possessing a love of public policy and public service. That was true, Mr. Speaker, whether he was in opposition or on the government benches in this House, or, of course, working for the people of Alberta as the province's 16th Premier. So his loss is Alberta's loss, but it's also Canada's loss. We hope his loved ones find strength in each other, even in their grief, and that Jim's memory will be a blessing to them in time. Thank you.
The honourable member for Humber River Black Creek.
Mr. Speaker, earlier today, the global spiritual leader of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community arrived in Ottawa for a formal visit to Parliament Hill. During his time with us, he will meet with cabinet ministers, senators, members of Parliament, and the Prime Minister in an effort to further underscore his peaceful message of love for all and hatred for none. This work is part of an ongoing effort undertaken by His Holiness to showcase the peaceful nature and beauty of the faith at a time when we are celebrating Islamic History Month and while calling upon global powers to advance an agenda of peace, religious freedoms, and the advancement of human rights in Canada and around the world. I applaud His Holiness and members of the Global Ahmadiyya Faith for their work, and I extend a hand of friendship on behalf of my constituents and the people of Canada. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
There have been discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, and I understand there is agreement We now rise and observe a moment of silence in honor of a man who was a friend to many of us, who we fondly remembered, and by the way, who was an outstanding hockey player as well, the Honourable Jim Prentice. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was elected on a promise to only borrow $10 billion. He broke that promise and instead borrowed 3 times more, $30 billion. Now we learn the Prime Minister is borrowing $46.5 billion. First it was 10, then it was 30, now it's almost 50 billion. When the Prime Minister misses his financial targets that many times in 1 year, how can Canadians trust him with their money?
The Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect us to make the investments necessary to create growth in this economy. But I'd very much like to take this initial moment to add my respects for our former colleague and dear friend Jim Prentice. Every side of this House feels his loss today, and we will all miss his intelligence, honesty, thoughtfulness, and the kindness he brought to his work. Jim was a man of deep convictions who dedicated his life to public service, to the people of Alberta, and to all Canadians. I cherish the time I spent working with Jim and will always remember his kind, thoughtful manner. Our hearts go out to Karen and his family, and while we know the void can never be filled, we hope that they are comforted by all the amazing stories and memories so many have shared over the past few days about Jim.
Leader of the Opposition.
Well, I appreciate the Prime Minister's sentiments, but back to my question, Mr. Speaker, and he defended his uncontrolled spending by telling us that it will create jobs and grow the economy. But the evidence is clear. It's not. The economy is not growing, and regular families across the country are losing income and they're losing jobs. It's a failed approach. It's not working. Borrowing more and more money is actually not creating jobs. So will the Prime Minister stop his reckless spending and start focusing on jobs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I find it humorous, Mr. Speaker, that the members opposite are talking about a failed approach, because for 10 years, their approach of lowering taxes on the wealthiest Canadians gave us the worst growth rate since R.B. Bennett in the depths of the Great Depression. One of the very first things we did was lower taxes on the middle class and raise them on the wealthiest 1%, and the Conservatives voted against that.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that when they borrow money, it has to be paid back. But the Prime Minister's plan is to pay it back with higher taxes. The Prime Minister has already hiked taxes on small businesses. He's cancelled tax credit for regular families for things like music lessons and hockey practice. Coming next is a payroll tax hike and a national carbon fuel tax hike. And the Prime Minister is now considering a tax on watching Netflix. Mr. Speaker, I know he's a Liberal, but is there a single tax that he doesn't like?
Right Honourable Prime Minister. Actually, Mr. Speaker, we chose to, instead of sending child benefits to millionaire families like the Conservatives wanted to do, we chose to give a more generous, tax-free benefit every month that lands in the 9 out of 10 Canadian families who needs it bank accounts. This is the kind of thing that helps the people who need it by doing less for the people who don't. The Conservatives never quite understood that, and that's possibly why they're in opposition today.
The honourable member for Lac Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, it's interesting to hear that the government gave money to 9 families out of 10. It's better not to take that money. This morning, I was with the colleagues and we announced a strategic approach to work on the softwood lumber issue. The government isn't taking action, but for us this is a very important issue. Could the government announce what it's going to do to save 400,000 jobs so that we keep those here to help people who work in this industry? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. The member has just shown that he doesn't understand that we actually provided help to those that need it, because if you give money to those that are in the highest tax brackets, they don't need the money. You don't give checks to millionaires like they did, but rather to give bigger checks to the 9 out of 10 Canadian families that need it most. They are continuing to not understand. We need to share wealth with everyone. The honourable member. My question dealt with the 400,000 workers in the forestry industry. I don't know if they're millionaires or not, but they are very concerned about the future of their jobs. In 2006, we managed to come up with an agreement, and then we had 10 years of stability. Now the government needs to take action. Will they act to save these jobs? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. We are certainly concerned about the future of all these jobs, and this is why we are working so hard to solve the softwood lumber issue. We know, though, that under the former government there was a broken relationship with the United States, and we are working to repair that, to rekindle investment and prosperity to help our communities and regions across the country.
A year ago, Liberals promised an immediate commitment for home care, but 363 days later, Canadians have seen absolutely nothing, not a cent. The government seems to be using this old commitment to distract from the fact that they're adopting Stephen Harper's cuts to the health care escalator. Right. Now, promises aren't negotiating chips, Mr. Speaker. They're promises. Why has this government abandoned true negotiations with the provinces? And why has the Prime Minister adopted the Stephen Harper approach to health care?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Actually, the Stephen Harper approach to health care consisted of writing a check and then not checking to see whether it was actually spent on health care. Canadians expect that new money invested by the federal government into health care be actually spent on health care. On top of that, we've made commitments to work with the provinces to invest in home care, because Canadians know that what we need is a system that cares for the sick and cares for the elderly, and demonstrate the kinds of collaboration within provinces and with the federal government that didn't happen for far too long.
Member for New Westminster, Burnaby, order.
So how do we take care of the sick and elderly when Liberals are cutting $5 billion a year from the health care escalator by 2020, just like Stephen Harper? Same old, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Prime Minister won't even sit down with the premiers. He's adopting Stephen Harper's rather insulting approach to the provinces. So much for real change. The premiers have made a good-faith proposal to give time to get Canadians out of this immediate health care crisis. We need a simple answer. Will the Prime Minister delay the Harper cuts for a year? Yes or no?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, we're looking forward to investing $21.5 billion in healthcare over the next 5 years of new money, and the only expectation we have is the expectation the Canadians have, that that money be actually spent on healthcare. That's what the previous government missed out on when it was investing in healthcare. We know that healthcare money must flow to healthcare. That's what Canadians expect. That's what the provinces expect as well.
The honourable member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagot. Mr. Speaker, during the election campaign, the Liberals promised immediate help for home care. But 1 year after being elected, they haven't put a penny in the budget for that commitment. They may be wanting to use that promise to try to make the provinces forget that the government is taking the same approach and cutting health transfers like Stephen Harper did. They're off to a bad start. Can the Prime Minister stop using that approach and commit to negotiating with the provinces? I would like to remind the honourable member that the federal government is not responsible for spending on health care. We have to work with the provinces, and I'm very pleased to sit down with the provinces to discuss how we will work together to meet the needs of Canadians while, of course, complying with jurisdictional responsibilities. The honourable member. It's the responsibility of the federal government to contribute at least 50% of the health budget. During the last campaign, the Prime Minister promised cooperative leadership for funding in health, but they're refusing to sit down with the provinces to discuss it. And that means this isn't real change. It's the Stephen Harper approach all over again. The Prime Minister needs to listen to the provinces. Can he show good faith and delay the cuts that were planned? The Honourable Prime Minister. Well, the Ministers of Health have a job to do. They need to talk about the issues, and this is what is happening today. The federal and provincial health ministers are discussing the health care funding to help Canadians. There was a lack of leadership for 10 years before the election, and the Canadian people voted for change, and this is what we are bringing about. The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about public finance. The government came into office saying there would be a modest deficit. And now we are hearing that it is even higher than the $30 billion that the government had admitted to. The TD Bank has said that it would be at least $34 billion. And it's going to be our children and grandchildren who will have to pay for this mismanagement. Can the Prime Minister stand and tell us how much the deficit will actually be? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. He will be joining the Finance Committee. He will understand that the changes that we have made are to help the middle class in Canada. We have made investments to help Canadian families. And we will be also making necessary changes to the Canada Pension Plan. Last week, we took more action. We are helping the Canadian economy, and we are on the right path. The Honourable Member. I would like to thank my colleague for his answer, but I would have preferred the Prime Minister to answer my question as I had asked. But the Prime Minister has said the budget will balance itself. Well, with that kind of economic theory, the results are predictable. A deficit of $34 billion. The government had said 30. Now we're hearing from the TD Bank $34 billion. Will the $100 billion deficit man tell us why he's being so irresponsible? The Right Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I would like to respond by saying that the Prime Minister already answered these questions, but the colleague will be on the Finance Committee, and he will come to understand what we've already done to help the middle class in Canada. We will continue to help families. We have an investment plan that will be of historic proportions, and we will make sure that we take more action. Countries around the world are saying that Canada is on the right path. We will continue to jumpstart Canadian growth.
Hardworking Canadians. The federally imposed carbon tax is just another example. Families, farmers, energy workers, charities, and small businesses in Alberta have already been devastated by unprecedented job losses. Imposing a cash-grabbing tax on everything will only make things more difficult for all Canadians, but especially hard-hit Albertans at the very worst time. Albertans want to know, why are the Liberals destroying Alberta's economy by kicking us while we're down?
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Conservatives, we're focused on supporting the middle-class Canadians and their families at every stage of their lives. Not only did the Conservatives vote against the Paris Agreement on climate change, but when it comes to middle-class Canadians, they opposed our government reducing taxes on 9 million Canadians. Our Canada Child Benefit that helps 9 out of 10 Canadian families and will lift 300,000 Canadian children out of poverty. Enhancements to student loans, which will help 250,000 Canadians. Our government is focused on both protecting our environment and growing our economy while helping the middle class and those working hard to join it.
Member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, tens of thousands of Albertans are out of work. People are losing their homes. Food banks and charities are bracing for the damage of a made-in-Ottawa carbon tax. Last week, one family feedlot told me it will add $500,000 in annual costs, risking their livelihoods. The Elk Island Public School Board says a carbon tax will add $400,000 in fuel costs every year. Why are the Liberals taking more away and making everything more expensive when people are already struggling to make ends meet?
Mr. Speaker, 80% of Canadians already live in a province where there is an effective price on carbon pollution, but more action is needed, and it's important to have a price on carbon pollution across the country. We've listened to provinces and territories, including the government of Alberta. Every province and territory has the flexibility to decide how they implement a price on carbon pollution, either a direct price or through a cap-and-trade system. Provinces and territories can use the revenues as they see fit, including reducing taxes if that's what they so choose to do.
The honourable member for Carleton.
The Prime Minister's new carbon tax will raise the price of things like food, heat and gasoline by $4,000 for the average middle-class family. The Prime Minister says, don't worry, all the money will go to provincial politicians like Kathleen Wynne. For her part, she plans to spend every nickel of it. So the tax is not revenue neutral. If this is really about climate change and not a money grab, why hasn't the Prime Minister mandated provincial politicians to give back every single cent through lower income taxes?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I think it might be worthwhile mentioning that it was the Conservatives in their 2008 platform and Speak from the Throne who committed to implement a price on carbon pollution through a cap-and-trade system. Their Turning the Corner plan committed the Conservative government to, and I'm quoting here, Mr. Speaker, force industry to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, set up a carbon emissions trading market, and establish a market price on carbon. Mr. Speaker, what are the Conservatives saying today that are different from what they actually told us in 2008?
Honourable member for Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has broken his promise to the middle class. A worker earning $45,000 a year got exactly zero from the Liberal government's middle-class tax changes. Yet, that same worker will now pay an extra $1,000 in carbon taxes, federally mandated carbon taxes that will go to Kathleen Wynne so that she can fund her so-called green energy insiders. What happened to social justice, Mr. Speaker? Why are the Liberals taxing the working poor to give to the undeserved rich?
Great question. Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are clear, and they were clear in the election. They want us to protect the environment and simultaneously grow the economy. This government has been working hard to grow the economy, focusing on areas such as clean tech, which will be the future of the Canadian economy in the next 30 to 40 years. And we have developed a strong and robust climate plan that will allow us to ensure that we meet our targets under the Paris Agreement.
The honourable member for Longueuil Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, the things are starting to heat up in the portfolio of the Minister of Heritage. A month ago, I reminded her that she still needed to make appointments at the CRTC, at the CBC. The CBC told us on the weekend that files are piling up, that hearings are getting behind schedule, and creators are concerned. Now, things are going badly in the department, but our system is in crisis. So what is the explanation for these delays? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank my colleague for his important question. We are determined to create a new appointment system that will be open and transparent. And this is being done across the government. So I would invite my colleague to check out the website. We will be making a number of appointments, and they will be good appointments.
Mr. Speaker, when the government doesn't fulfill its responsibility to fill vital appointments, it has tangible and direct effect on Canadians. Earlier this month, a first-degree murder charge was thrown out in Edmonton due to unreasonable delays. The national judicial vacancy rate has more than tripled since this government took office. Judicial vacancies cause the entire justice system to slow down. So when will the Liberal government take the appointments process seriously and fill these vacancies?
Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the question, and certainly am very mindful of the realities across this country with respect to judicial vacancies. Our government is committed to a fair, relevant, and accessible justice system, and I am further committed to working with the provinces and the territories in a collaborative way to ensure that the many factors that lead to judicial delays are addressed, including the appointment of judges. And I very much look forward to announcing in the near future the appointments of more judges to our superior courts.
Honourable member for Prince Albert.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister loves to brag about his great relationship with President Obama, but relationships are more than gala dinners and photo ops at the White House. It's about getting things done for Canadians. Prime Minister Harper was able to negotiate agreements on softwood lumber not once, but twice with 2 different presidents. If the Liberals' relationship with Washington is so great, why won't the Prime Minister pick up the phone, call the President, and get a deal done?
Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Previous agreement expired under the previous government's watch. We will continue negotiations as we work to meet the mandate agreed by President Barack Obama and our Prime Minister in June. We'll continue to work closely with lumber producers, workers, the provinces and territories. Any agreement must reflect the realities of our softwood lumber sector, including differences in communities across Canada. We're seeking a good deal for Canada, not just any deal.
Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, I read somewhere recently that the Minister of Trade speaks 5 languages. Apparently, trade isn't one of them. Mr. Speaker, from forest to mill, almost 400,000 high-quality, well-paying forestry jobs are now at risk because of this minister's inaction on the softwood lumber file. In one of my communities alone, 2 mills are at risk. That's 400 jobs and a quarter of the municipal tax base. How does a Minister of Trade expect people to continue to work and live in the communities they call home when there's no jobs to put food on the table for their families?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind the House again the softwood lumber agreement expired under the previous government's watch, but I also want to say that our government has delivered for Canadians on trade time after time. In December, we eliminated discriminatory coal legislation in the U.S. Then we secured expanded access to Mexico and China for beef, and I am...
Order. We all want to hear the answer to the question. The Honourable Minister of International Trade has a few seconds left, just a few, unless she's done.
Got a deal done for canola. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Battleford, Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, we know well that the softwood lumber file has never been a priority for this Liberal government. It wasn't in their budget, wasn't in their throne speech, and it's not in that minister's mandate letter. We've never had a government whose deadlines have gone disregarded, I guess I would say. Even the 100-day self-imposed one last spring, they've removed the stability and predictability vital to our forest industry jobs in the communities those people live in. Will the minister at least get on the phone and secure a standstill of American litigation while negotiations are still ongoing?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the previous government did nothing to secure a softwood lumber agreement, and the agreement expired under their watch. I was shocked to learn that they did not begin even to negotiate. And you know what? The member from Lac Saint-Jean himself confirmed that this morning in a press conference. He said, and I quote, Conservatives had started discussions, not negotiations. Well, Mr. Speaker, we're not just chatting with the Americans. We are negotiating intensively. We're looking for a good deal, not just any deal.
Member for Battleford, Lloydminster.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Pulp Fiction was a cult film that became the title of Liberal softwood policy. They continue to blame everyone but themselves for their failure in getting a new softwood lumber deal across the finish line. Now almost 400,000 workers and whole communities in the forestry sector are hostage to an impending Liberal trade war with the U.S. When will the Trade Minister stop treating these jobs as an afterthought and solve this dispute before livelihoods become Liberal collateral damage?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are working extremely hard on getting a great deal for Canada. But I want to quote some other people who see how hard we're working. I'm going to start with the member for Caribou Prince George. He told the committee this summer, and I quote, I can appreciate that there's been a considerable amount of work done to this point by both Global Affairs and the minister. Christy Clark said something very similar, and I quote, I've got to give her credit. She's worked day and night to try and resolve this. It's been her central focus for the last several months, and I'm still working hard.
The honourable member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, in 2007, after NDP pressure, the Conservative government blocked the foreign takeover of Canadian satellite maker MDA. The sale was rejected to stop U.S. control of sensitive technology and information. But now the company has shifted to the U.S., control right there under the Liberals' noses without them making a difference right now. And just last week, the minister was actually musing about further weakening Canada's foreign takeover laws. Will the minister investigate to ensure Canadian laws are being enforced, and will he close loopholes that threaten Canadian companies and investment by Canadians?
The Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member opposite for the question. Our government, first and foremost, is very committed to the space sector. So when he talks about MDA, this is an organization that I visited, and we've made investments with respect to that organization as well. Just with respects to MDA and its corporate structure as well, as the member opposite knows, corporate reorganizations are not subject to the net benefit provisions under the Investment Canada Act. And investment is subject to net benefit review only when a non-Canadian acquires control of a Canadian business in a manner that is set out in the Act. So, Mr. Speaker, we're monitoring the situation very closely, and I can tell the member opposite that we take foreign investments very seriously.
The honourable member for Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, last Thursday, an American tugboat and tanker barge ran aground on BC's north coast. The accident caused 200,000 litres of diesel to spill into a sensitive area. If this was a fully loaded supertanker, it would have caused massive devastation to our fisheries, First Nation communities, and our marine environment. When will the Liberals make good on their promise to protect our coasts and implement a permanent ban on crude oil tankers off BC's north coast?
Well, Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, improving marine safety is a very high priority for this government. That is why I am working with my colleague from Fisheries and Ocean and the Coast Guard to improve marine safety for this country, as well as working on a moratorium, and we'll have things to say shortly. In the meantime, I should let him know that the Pacific Pilotage Authority has revoked the exemption for piloting for the company in question. The TSB is on location. I have appointed a ministerial observer, and we will, at Transport Canada, be conducting a compliance inspection.
De Montréal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
To join the Prime Minister, the Minister of Canadian Heritage, the Leader of the Opposition, the Leader of the NDP, and many of our colleagues at the site dedication ceremony for the National Holocaust Monument in Ottawa. Est-ce que la ministre peut nous informer?
Can the minister inform us of the progress of this bill and the importance of building a monument like this is for the government? I'd like to thank the member for Mont-Royal for this important question. I'm proud of our government's commitment to the National Holocaust Monument.
And sobering reminder to all Canadians of the tragedy of the Holocaust. It will honor those 6 million Jews and millions of others, including Roma, homosexuals, and disabled people who lost their lives. Must we never forget the horrors of the Holocaust and continue to fight the hatred and disregard of humankind.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is about to vote at the UN for members of the sardonically named Human Rights Council. 4 notorious human rights abusers are among the candidates, again, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Cuba. Mr. Speaker, the vote is secret, but we know favours are traded in the UN process, and we recognise the Liberals' indecent appetite for Security Council votes. Will the Liberals tell Canadians and the world how Canada will vote on these 4 human rights abusers?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada would like to tell the world that we absolutely intend to lead the resolution on the situation of human rights in Iran at the UN General Assembly's 71st session. We believe that engagement allows us to more effectively hold Iran to account, and I know that's one of their concerns. Engagement is a harder path than the Conservative government ever chose to take. Isolation is not the way to go. We believe that we are advancing Canadian interests and the interests of our allies by engaging with them more. Thank you.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
No answer. Well, Mr. Speaker, Canadians have learned that the mayor of Montreal travelled to Iran to meet with the mayor of Tehran, a key player in that country's terrorist sponsoring and human rights abusing regime. Denny Coderre signed a cooperation agreement with Mohammad Khalibaf, a senior figure in Iran's Revolutionary Guard, which directs the brutal theocracy's horrific domestic and foreign agenda. Mr. Speaker, was the minister aware of his former Liberal colleague's ill-advised misadventure, or is this part of the Liberal government's misguided quest to normalise relations?
Hear, hear. Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, first of all, Mayor Coderre is the best person to answer as to his own travel. Speaking on behalf of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and our government, we are committed to a step-by-step re-engagement with Iran. We believe that an absence of diplomatic representation hurts our interests. A presence advances our interests, particularly with regard to consular matters. We know that engagement is a tougher path, but it's a necessary one to deal effectively with Middle East security issues and to hold Iran to account on human rights.
Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Engagement is appeasement, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Foreign Affairs Minister put his hypocrisy on display to the entire world. He took to Twitter to call on the international community to uphold its responsibility to protect civilians from the mass atrocities of ISIS. Canada was a leader in doing precisely that. Our CF-18s took out nearly 400 fighting positions in Iraq and Syria. If the minister truly believes in the responsibility to protect civilians, why did he pull out our CF-18s? Does he naively believe that his tweets are more effective than Canada's fighter jets?
The Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I'm actually very proud of the work that our Canadian Armed Forces has done overseas. As you know, that the Iraqi security forces launched their operation on Mosul. As the Prime Minister announced back in February, Canada continues support for the coalition partners, where we've expanded our training, advise and assist mission. We've expanded our intelligence, put our role to hospital, and these are just amongst a few. And this is why we've actually taken so many cities to help the Iraqi security forces to take these steps. And if we hadn't done this, the coalition would not have been as effective. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, last Saturday, the Minister of Foreign Affairs used Twitter to call on the UN and the international community to protect Syrians from atrocities. But what's the government doing to protect Syrians? Absolutely nothing. What's worse, by bringing our F-18s back, which were used to strike ISIL in the region, they have put civilian lives in danger. If the Liberals believed in what they said, they would send the F-18s back to fight ISIL. What has the government done, Mr. Speaker, to protect Syrians?
Mr. Speaker, the protection of civilians is extremely important for our government, especially the operation that we're conducting in Iraq. By actually increasing the right type of intelligence, doubling intelligence for the coalition, tripling the intelligence, we've been able to make the Iraqi securities far more effective on the ground, and that's where the protection of civilians actually happen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals still have failed to sign a new softwood lumber agreement, and the deadline has passed. Last summer, the government implied that an agreement was on the verge of being concluded. In reality, soon, our entire industry will suffer because of additional U.S. tariffs. The minister has refused to give any guarantees to workers who want to know what the government's going to do to protect their jobs. Can the minister tell us today if, yes or no, her government has a plan B to support the industry before a trade war breaks out? The Honourable Minister. The expiry occurred under the previous government. We continue to work closely with the producers, workers, the provinces and territories, and we will continue to work with them. Canada is prepared for all possibilities, has a plan B, and our government will vigorously defend the interests of workers and producers in this country. We are looking for a good agreement for Canada, not just any agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope that includes loan guarantees for the softwood lumber industry. Canadians were promised transparency, yet this trade minister is still being evasive about the ongoing negotiations of CETA. Wallonia's vote against CETA highlights the many ongoing concerns, including threats to local sovereignty from investor-state provisions. Now, this Prime Minister is questioning the relevance of Europe, when in fact many Canadians share similar concerns about this trade deal. The minister is so focused on the concerns of Europeans, but when will she focus on Canadians' concerns and fix this deal once and for all?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, CETA is one of my top priorities, and I continue to be engaged actively with Canadian partners and with our European partners constantly on this issue. I want to say to the honourable member opposite, I am surprised to hear from the NDP, a party that likes to talk about how it cares about the interests of Quebec, questions of this deal, which is so essential for all of Canada, but particularly for Quebec in terms of bringing us closer to Francophone Europe. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton. Order.
Speaker, serious criminal cases have been thrown out of court as a result of the failure of the Minister of Justice to fill judicial vacancies. Now in Alberta, a case involving the most serious offence was thrown out of court, a first-degree murder case. Mr. Speaker, how many more cases is the Minister of Justice prepared to see thrown out of court before she does her job and starts appointing judges?
The Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate being able to stand up and speak to the work that our government is doing with respect to ensuring a fair, relevant, and accessible criminal justice system. We are working extremely hard. I am working with my counterparts in the provinces and territories to address the relevant factors that lead to delays, including the appointment of judges. I was very fortunate to have appointed 15 judges back in June, and I'm looking forward to making an announcement very soon with respect to additional Superior Court judges.
Member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal government should be ashamed of their approach to First Nations transparency. 300 band members from the Sanson Cree Nation are now calling for a forensic audit into how their chief and council spent federal funds. They know that there was money that was supposed to be going into programs such as suicide and gang violence prevention, but they see very little change on the ground. When will the government respond to their plea for a forensic audit and also start to enforce the First Nations Transparency Act?
The Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. Accountability and transparency are key tenets for all First Nations as well as for this government, and it's ensuring the delivery of the historic investments in Indigenous and Northern communities through Budget 2016. We are engaging with First Nations on the way forward in transparency and accountability, and as the member well knows, any member of any First Nation can ask our government to provide the audited financial statements at any time, and I welcome that request.
Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, the story continues. Band members in Alexander and Onion Lakes First Nations are calling for financial transparency. In Alexander, an investigation identified $2.1 million in unexplained payments. In Onion Lake, they haven't even provided basic information. With the First Nations Transparency Act, band members, for the first time ever, have access to basic information that all Canadians deserve. When will they enforce the Financial Transparency Act?
When? Honourable Minister.
As the member well knows, Mr. Speaker, that top-down solutions don't work, and in the Kelowna court, the call for a First Nations Auditor General was immediately torn up by the previous government. We are taking very seriously any allegations of misuse of public funds, and when necessary, we do conduct forensic audits to ensure that the funds were used properly. The audit was commissioned by Alexander First Nation, and therefore we cannot comment on it, but we were reviewing the situation in order to determine whether or not a forensic audit will be required.
Member for Sault Ste. Marie.
Mr. Speaker, I was very pleased to host meetings this past week with the Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development and local stakeholders in my riding of Sault Ste. Marie. I'm equally proud of our government as it makes historic investments in post-secondary education. My question for the Minister is, Northern Ontario is a large landmass and has communities of all shapes and sizes scattered throughout. We face a unique challenge in promoting economic development. Can the Minister responsible for promoting regional economic development share with us his plans for Northern Ontario?
Honourable Minister.
From Sault Ste. Marie for his question, and it really is an honour and privilege to work with him and other colleagues from Northern Ontario. Our government is doing its part, Mr. Speaker, and we're promoting economic development. Just last week, we invested $9 million to Confederation College, $5 million to Sioux College, $5.1 million to the Shingwauk Education Trust, $2.7 million to Oshkosh Education Institute, $2.5 million to Algoma University, $1.6 million for women entrepreneurship, Mr. Speaker, and there's many more investments yet to come. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix. Mr. Speaker, recently at the Official Languages Committee, we learned recently that the French test for accepting immigrants was much more costly than the English test. And that situation is truly unacceptable. What's more, the committee had asked the Department of Immigration to send us the test, and there was no response. Can the minister ensure that the French test will not cost more than the English test?
Ministre de l'Immigration.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for her question. We take very seriously the challenges faced by Francophones outside Quebec. We have announced a program with specific advantages. We are likely going to add points for Francophones outside Quebec to help them. So in many ways, we are helping them, and in terms of that specific question, with the cost of the test, we are looking into it. The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Mr. Speaker, while the Prime Minister was being photographed in Montreal saying that Canada wanted to be a leader when it came to fighting HIV/AIDS, his government was quietly cutting support to organizations working on fighting HIV/SIDA. And for the sector, the consequences are devastating, and they're directly affecting highly vulnerable people, namely in Aboriginal communities and in the LGBT community. Will the minister do the right thing and restore funding to these organizations?
The Secretary for Health.
The Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, HIV and Hep C are serious but preventable diseases. The funding that the Public Health Agency of Canada provides to community-based organizations across the country to combat HIV and Hep C is staying steady at $26.4 million. There are a number of new organizations that have been invited to submit full proposals. This is in part of an open, objective, evidence-based and transparent process, and decisions were made by the Committee of the Technical Experts. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Toronto Danforth.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Speaker, last September, Canada looked at our Paralympic performance in Rio. They are among the best in the world. But when they go back home, they face difficulties with respect to access across the country.
Persons with disabilities share with the House some of her vision and what she hopes to achieve with Canada's accessibility legislation.
The Honourable Minister.
I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her question. Our government is committed to ensuring better access for Canadians in our communities, in their workplaces, from sea to sea to sea.
Proactively address barriers to inclusion and shift the conversation on disabilities in this country. This is my vision, but we want to hear from Canadians, and I encourage everyone in this House and every Canadian to participate in the consultations that are ongoing through February 2017. We're going to make a difference with this law, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They may not want to admit it, but the job situation in Alberta is critical. Here is the real impact of the Liberal tax policy on some of the Alberta communities. High River minor hockey registration down 20%. A Calgary dance studio down 100 kids. And Redwater Food Bank usage is up 60%. Wow. You took away the child's fitness tax credit, and you took away the universal child care benefit, and you're replacing it with a job-killing carbon tax that is only going to make a dire situation much worse. Mr. Speaker, when is this government going to realize that the tax policy decisions that they are making and these schemes are only going to make lives much worse for Canadian families?
Mr. Speaker, as I said before, unlike the Conservatives, we're focused on supporting middle-class Canadians and families who are working hard to join the middle class. You know, not only did the Conservatives vote against the Paris Agreement and the Vancouver Declaration, but they've also voted against almost everything that we've actually done to improve the lives of Canadians across the country. They voted against reducing taxes for 9 out of 10 million Canadians. They voted against a child benefit that helps 9 out of 10 Canadian families and lifts 300,000 Canadian children out of poverty. Our government is focused on protecting the environment and growing the economy in a responsible way.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, mothers who lose their jobs following their parental leave aren't entitled to employment insurance. The Minister has known this a long time and is not taking any action. And the government simply hiding behind another round of consultations. But the solution is simple, and everyone knows that. It's just a matter of political will. Will the Minister change the regulation without delay, as we proposed, so that Quebec women stop being punished for simply being mothers? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through Budget 2016, the government announced changes to improve employment insurance so that more Canadians could get the help they need when they need it. Our government is committed to improving EI, and this includes making compassionate care benefits more flexible and more inclusive for those who provide care for seriously ill family members and providing more flexibility in parental benefits and leaves. As the honourable member knows, we are involved in consultations with provinces, territories and other stakeholders in the coming weeks in order to modernize employment insurance. I want to thank the honourable member for the question.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the French Prime Minister, Manuel Valls, said that full face coverings is a problem with the democratic values. It denigrates women. Now, our Prime Minister, who is a Democrat, must understand this. If he's in favor of equality amongst men and women, what is the Prime Minister waiting for to impose a situation which requires women to uncover their faces at a citizenship ceremony?
And a government that understands that gender equality is good for all Canadians. When women have the right to live in communities, thrive in their academic or their employment situations, and are supported by communities that understand that we value diversity, that is when our entire country will succeed. Hear, hear. Mr. Speaker, we have a Prime Minister that is a feminist. We have a government that supports gender equality. I'm very proud of a country that understands this is good for all of us.
The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, for Manuel Valls, as for the Muslim Canadian Congress, the so-called religious signs like full face covering veils are more often religious symbols, or political demands are not religious symbols. The Bloc Québécois believes that the best way to protect religions is for the state not to have one. Moreover, the equality between men and women is a foundation of our democracy. Will the Prime Minister listen to reason and make it mandatory to uncover one's face in order to vote?
Mr. Speaker, the values that define Canada include respect and openness towards our full diversity. Our country's diversity is a source of strength, and we as politicians need to focus on bringing people together instead of promoting division. We're working to create conditions where all Canadians have the best chances to live safe, healthy, and productive lives. We will respect the diversity of Canadian communities, and we will visit with people in ways that are appropriate for their communities, whether they're military communities, religious communities, or Indigenous communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I would like to draw to the presence of honourable members the presence in the gallery of His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, head of the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community. This will conclude question period for today. Order. I encourage members to take their discussions into the lobbies. Order. Tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 109 of the House of Commons, I have the honour to present in both official languages the government response to the second report of the Standing Committee on Official Languages entitled Study of the Translation Bureau. Thank you, Mr.
Dépôt de projet de loi émanant du gouvernement.
Introduction of government bills, statements by ministers, reports from interparliamentary delegations, presenting reports from committees. The Honourable Member for Montreal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have the honour of presenting in both official languages, the fifth report of the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights